So what is meant by management? And a couple of definitions in here. Uh, Rosemary Stewart suggests that management is getting things done through other people. So the manager, the team, and it is for the manager to allocate tasks to people to make sure that people carry out those tasks and perhaps even to motivate and to inspire those people. Remember, all the way back to the start of the lectures, we had the definition of an organization, and very important in that definition, there was the idea that an organization is a social arrangement. In other words, you're dealing with people, people with feelings, their own aspirations, their own preferences, their own likes and dislikes, and so on. I think you'll see that sometimes the early theories in management left out the social aspect, and it wasn't until about 1935 or so that real work and understanding began to be done on the importance of this social aspect that should be part of management. Anyway, the earliest theories of management are known as classical management theories. Here the word classical suggests that there is a correct way of doing things, so that in a classical piece of music, a classical symphony, there were laid down ways in which the piece of work would progress and so on. In classical Greek architecture, there is a suggestion that a certain proportion in front of the temple, for example, was pleasing to the eye, and if you did something in a different way, it was non-classical, they would effectively say it was incorrect. So these early theories of management were very prescriptive. They say, you know, this is it, and there is only the one way of managing, and if you don't do it like this, you're doing it incorrectly. And that's something which later theories let go of. And one of the earliest theories was Henri Fayol, and he came up with what he said were the 5 functions of managers. And these 5 functions of managers were, first of all, managers should plan. They should be thinking what we're going to be doing next month, etc. They should be organizing their people, organizing people into maybe functions, into teams, and so on, telling people what to get done when, and so on. Commanding is part of that. Coordinating, so if you're making 500 units, make sure you can distribute 500 units, and so on. And controlling, if you tell people to make 500 units and they only make 400 units, then there's some sort of investigation has to be done. And that would be part of the controlling of performance. To some extent, no one would argue with any of these, but maybe knowing them doesn't help you be a manager. I don't think anyone kind of says, right, it's 10 o'clock now, time for a bit of organizing, and then it's 11 o'clock, I better go on to the coordinating and so on. I think knowing these will not help a poor manager necessarily be a good manager. Also, particularly noteworthy because of its absence, there is nothing in here, for example, about motivating, about inspiring employees and so on, of getting them to want to do better. You can command them and so on, tell them to do better and so on. You can upbraid them, you can kind of punish them in some way if they don't do better, don't hit production targets and so on. But it's a very kind of I'm the manager, you're the staff, you do what I say kind of thing. And this is not perhaps surprising because really until I suppose about the middle of the 1800s there weren't very many large organizations around. Most businesses were fairly small then. And when businesses began to grow, the only large organizations around that they could draw perhaps inspiration from was essentially military organizations. And the military organizations were very much, I'm the officer, you're the man, you do what I say kind of thing. don't ask any questions, just kind of get on with it. And the early theories followed this very kind of dictatorial or kind of autocratic approach to management. Around the same sort of time, Frederick Taylor invented or came up with this theory of scientific management. And believe it or not, it was kind of not realized at the time that a function of managers is maybe to work out how best to do things and instruct their staff that this is a way to do it. Again, if you kind of go back before large organizations were invented, most working people, for example, were individual tradespeople. You'd have a blacksmith, you'd have maybe a weaver. They were essentially working on their own, and they knew what they were doing. They had a skill, and managers didn't think that I should be telling them how to do their job. But Taylor had this idea that it was a purpose of management to discover the best way for people to do their work, and that this is a scientific approach, an experimental approach. And the story is told that one of his experiments dealt with people. There was apparently a profession way back then who were called shovelers. And a shovel is a thing like that you would move, say, snow with, or coal, or soil, or something of that sort. And essentially manual labor. There weren't very many machines around, and there was a kind of a group of people who made their living, if you like, out of manual labor like this. And Taylor did experiments to say what is the most efficient weight to shift, to put on the end of your shovel. So you get a good compromise between moving a reasonable amount and not becoming tired very quickly, or not maybe doing yourself an injury of some sort. And let's say that he came up with the idea that 10 kilograms was the ideal weight to put on a shovel, so you could work all day, reasonable pace, and this would maximize the amount of material that you could move. And then he realized that, okay, if you want to get 10 kilograms onto a shovel, and you were moving, for example, soil, then 10 kilograms of soil would occupy a certain volume, if you like. But if you were perhaps moving wheat, that would be a different volume. If you were moving coal, that would be a different size, if you like, really. And he said what you should do is you should have kind of shovels of, if you like, different sizes, depending on what you were moving, but they would be suited to that, so that whatever you put on that, you should choose the right shovel. There'd always be about 10 kilograms of it. And he says, for example, managers should make sure that they equip their staff correctly and instruct them, use the right implement for the job, do it like this, and that's going to be more efficient. So there was a science at work, find out by experiment what's going to work, apply it to job design, tell people this is a way to do it, and that this will increase your productivity and will increase workers' wages. And there should be this kind of cooperation, if you like, interchange between managers and their workers. Now, the benefits that came from this were as follows. There was an increase in productivity. The wages were, again, almost scientifically computed, so that depending on your output, you get more wages. So there's kind of productivity linked to your reward in there. Part of it was also that you should take care of your workforce, that if you injure them or tire them out and so on, it's not going to be good for the company and so on. But unfortunately, his kind of scientific approach to management, saying what is the most efficient way of doing things, was really the beginnings of, I suppose you'd call it, the classical production line, where you have a row of people standing along the production line. They stand there, the products kind of come along in front of them on a conveyor belt, and they just sit there all day, doing the same thing over and over again. Because this was scientifically found to be the most efficient way of making goods. But of course, sitting there day after day doing exactly the same task dehumanizes work. And towards the end of his career and after his death, Taylor was vilified as someone who was certainly not the workers' friend. He was the person who condemned workers to this very, very kind of repetitive and kind of non-rewarding, might be financially rewarding, but not in any other way, this kind of robotic type of approach. But he didn't start out that way. His whole ambition was, I want to be able to pay my workers more. I want them to be able to earn more. And by these scientific approaches to management, I will enable them to earn more. So, but again, it was very much managers telling workers how to do it. Around 1935, a very famous set of experiments was done by a researcher called Elton Mayo. And these are called the Hawthorne studies because they were named after a General Electric plant in America called the Hawthorne plant. And Mayo was called in by the managers of this plant because they were, anyway, slightly motivated, slightly confused by what people were doing, and they wanted some research to be done. And the first thing Mayo did as part of his experiments was he divided the workforce into two, and they were doing very kind of intricate wiring work and making coils and so on, very intensively manual. Divided the workforce into two, and with one group he kept the lighting constant, and with the second group he varied the lighting up and down, and varied the type of lighting and so on. And he would go back